Welcome to the Cryonics Institute's 2022 annual general meeting. This will be our 45th annual general meeting. We hope you enjoyed your tour of our facilities, including our newest building, the additional building that is currently being retrofitted to accept suspension patients. As you can see, we are growing and adapting to our membership needs, and we will be having a group of speakers to update all of you on CI's financial, standby health, research and development, various other developments that are coming on board. CI is currently the largest cryonics organization in the world in terms of membership, also in terms of whole body suspensions. We currently, as of last count, had 2,122 members, and that includes 230 patients in actual suspension.
Any chance you could turn it up here? It's hard to hear.
Sure. Can you hear me a little better now? Please lead into the microphone. I was just saying that the Cryonics Institute is now currently the largest cryonics organization in the world with 2,122 members, and that includes 230 patients in actual suspension. If that's not enough, we're also the most inexpensive cryonics organization, and we've been doing this for a long time, since 1976. So we're proud of our track record, and where we're going as a cryonics organization, and that includes everyone here as members. Let me ask you a question. How many people here are members of the Cryonics Institute? And how many people are thinking about membership with the Cryonics Institute? All right, excellent. Another question I'd like to ask is of the people who are here in attendance, how many are signed up with SST, or stabilization, standby, and transport, or have something going on locally? Okay, because that's something we're going to talk about. We're going to have a couple speakers talking about standby and the importance of it, one way or shape or the other. But with no further ado, I would like to offer to you our first speaker. Our first speaker is Patrick Heller. I'm going to read a little bit about Patrick. Just as an introduction. As an introduction, Pat Heller is a certified public accountant. Through mostly he deals with rare coins and precious metals. He is the owner and chief executive officer of Liberty Coin Service of Lansing, Michigan. He has become, he's the treasurer of the CI in 1980, and he has served as the vice president of CI. Twice each year, Pat spends an entire day at the Cryonics Institute drawing up financial statements and assisting with the preparation of tax statements and other CI reporting requirements. Pat's knowledge of accounting, taxes, and his extensive business experience have made him an extreme asset and as a director and a treasurer to CI. Pat's volunteer activities are exemplary of how CI is able to keep its prices low. Thanks for all you do, and please welcome Pat Heller.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. As a slight correction of my biography, I no longer own Liberty Coin Service, but I still work there and average about 30 hours a week as a communications officer. Now, there's being handed out 2 sets of financial statements. One is for the fiscal year end, December 31, 2021. The other one is for the 6 months ended June 30, 2022. But I understand that a lot of people in this room are not necessarily that familiar with how to read a financial statement. So there's another handout that says Guide to Understanding the Financial Statements at Cryonics Institute. There's 30 copies of these, and I see there's about 42 or 44 people. So say if you're a couple, if you can just have one of you take one, and that should cover everybody here. And then I also have the formal treasurer's report. Ready for the first slide there. The good news is that the year 2021 was the best financial year in the history of the Cryonics Institute. The bad news is the first 6 months of 2022 were the worst financial period for Cryonics Institute. The extremes, two extremes there were largely as a result of the investment market. At June 30th, 2022, the Cryonics Institute had 10.9 million in assets and a fund balance of almost $8 million. The Cryonics Institute has no debt. The only significant liability is almost $3 million that members have prepaid in their Cryonics contracts, which are refundable on demand, although over the 46-year history of Cryonics Institute, less than $300,000 has been requested over that time period. And as a matter of fact, about 1/3 of the ones the refunds were requested have later been returned to Cryonics Institute. Going forward, there's still going to be significant expenses to pay for a sprinkler system in the second building. And cost of cryostats has been going up. And since we're getting more patients, that's going to be a constant continuing purchase. The insurance costs are also going up because when you have two buildings, it costs more for liability insurance. And also you have greater amount of contents. There's more cryostats, for instance. So you're going to have more contents insurance coverage. Now, for those of you that have the June 30th, 2022 financial statements in front of you, it shows a net of expenses over revenues, meaning a loss of almost $1.5 million due entirely to the investments, or almost totally to that. But it is not necessarily safe to look at a relatively short period of time. So I went back and looked at the year before the pandemic started going forward. So the 42-month period from January 1, 2019 up to the end of June 2022. And if you look over that entire period, the patient care investments had a net increase of $862,000 in market value, just for gains, not by additional funds coming in from new patients. In addition, the patient care assets increased almost $400,000 from dividends, interest income, and some amount of capital gains distributions from some of the investments. And that includes the $1.5 million loss in the first 6 months of 2022. So Cryonics Institute over time is still gaining on its investment policies. The assets in the contract prepayments are kept and accounted for separately. And those over the 42-month period had investment losses of $83,177. However, over that time, the contract prepayment assets generated dividends, interest income, and capital gains distributions of more than $173,000. So that also kept increasing, even with the negative results in the first 6 months of 2022. Now, another way to say, well, how's the organization doing is from January 1, 2019 through June 30, 2022, a 42-month period, the general operations organization.
Excuse me, Pat. Pat, there's an echo.
And net expenses in excess of revenues of a little over $31,000, approximately in balance.
Pat, excuse me.
However, during that time period, there were
Somebody needs to mute.
$1.45 million received in new memberships and bequests that went direct to contributing capital. So the organization is actually gaining in financial strength over the years. Now, at last year's meeting, there was a question from the members here asking if the Cryonics Institute would consider having financial statements with an independent audit by a certified public accountant. That is not something I can do. I'm no longer licensed to practice as that. And as treasurer, I cannot do that myself. But the board of directors has agreed that starting with the December 31st, 2022 financial statements, we will have them audited by an independent certified public accountant. And then also with recent significant increases in consumer prices in general, the board of directors will be reviewing contract pricing. The general summary is that Cryonics Institute is financially solid and stable. It's growing. Despite the significant investment losses in the first 6 months of 2020 and the first 6 months of 2022. Now, if we can go on to the next slide, do a little bit of explanation on the financial statements. There are 3 financial statements. You have a statement of assets, liabilities, and fund balance. Some call it a balance sheet that states the financial position of the organization as of the date of the financial statements. You have a statement of revenues and expenses. For-profit organizations call it an income statement or profit and loss statement. You also have a statement of cash flows because a lot of activities such as fixed asset purchases or new memberships or bequests don't go through the revenue and expense statement. The second and third statement cover a period of time. We can go to the next slide. And then there's also 3 categories. Patient care funds are ultimately the intention is that the income from investment and dividends and income and gains from investment will cover the continuing cost to maintain patients in storage. Then the contract prepayment assets are segregated so that we reflect the ability of the organization should people request a refund of their contract prepayments that would be possible to do. And then everything else goes into general operations. Yeah, the combined total is just adding of all 3 categories together. The financial statements are prepared on a cash basis, which means you count revenues or funds coming in when they actually get here, and you record expenses or asset purchases when the funds are actually paid out. I already covered that, so you can keep going. All right, for the statement of assets, liabilities, and fund balance, the cash and property and equipment are recorded at historical cost. The current replacement cost of the property is a lot higher than reflected on the financial statements. For instance, the first Cryonics Institute building right now is more than 94% written off through depreciation, but it is likely that it is worth as much as it cost, if not more. So even though on the books, it might only say the building's worth $30,000 or $40,000, it still might be worth $300,000. The cryostats would cost significantly more to replace, as would the other equipment. The investments are marked to market value as of the financial statement date, which is different than you only record gains or losses when you ultimately sell or close out an investment. By marking to market, you have more severe fluctuations in investment returns than may actually end up being the case. To give one example, Cryonics Institute has, I believe it's now 5 annuities on officers and directors, not for the purpose of getting a stream of cash flow, but the idea is to get the death benefit when those members die. So it is possible that while the member is still alive that's covered by an annuity, you could show a gain or a loss. Ultimately, Cryonics Institute would get significantly more funds when that member dies. That's not the usual purpose for which people get annuities, but that can show volatility until the ultimate death of the member that's covered by that. The assets in contract prepayment are mostly in certificates of deposit. Their maturity dates are staggered so that pretty much every month you have 1 or 2 CDs maturing. And if there was a sudden call for refund of prepayments, the funds will be available at most, looks like in a few weeks. So that's never been a problem, being able to make refunds when people have requested it. If you look at the financial statement, the fund balance is effectively the net worth of the organization. We can go to down another step there and keep going further. Yeah, the contributed capital reflects membership fees and bequests. The next line below that, the accumulated balance, is the net of revenues over expenses over the 46-year history of the organization. The line below that reflects how have the organization's expenses and revenues done, in this case at June 30 for the previous 6 months. We'll go on to the next one. And the statement of revenues and expenses, Cryonics services income is for human and pet patients, for storage of DNA samples, and referral fees, such as we occasionally get one from Suspended Animation. Some bequests that the organization receives, such as if they're paid by an annuity, may be taxable. So that's considered as income if and when those happen. But generally, the other lines on there are income or gains or losses from investments. And the expenses, the Cryonics services and supplies over time should net to about 0. Those of you familiar with the Cryonics Institute contracts are that the patient or the patient's estate are responsible for the expenses to get the body to Cryonics Institute. But sometimes it's more practical for Cryonics Institute to make those arrangements and pay for it and then later get reimbursed from the patient's estate. Insurance expenses cover multiple different categories. It's employee health and workers' compensation. You have liability insurance for the organization, liability insurance for the officers and directors, and you also have insurance on the building and the contents. The administrative services are payments to the limited liability company of the president of Cryonics Institute in lieu of paying him as an employee. He does not live in the state of Michigan, and it makes the paperwork cost simpler to go this route. The Cryonics Institute is registered with the state of Michigan as a nonprofit organization. It has not yet been classified as a tax-exempt 501c3 organization by the Internal Revenue Service. So the organization, if it does have income, is subject to paying federal and state income taxes. And we can keep going on here. Statement of cash flows shows the impact on the organization. Yeah, we can go down another slide there. Keep going. All right, that's the right one. This is a good example of the benefit of a cash flow statement. Despite the significant loss, the loss was a decrease in investments, or as opposed to cash flow. It wasn't money paid out, it was just decrease in investments. But there was a significant expenditure for the liquid nitrogen bulk storage tanks at the 2 buildings and more cryostats in particular. So there was cash paid out to acquire fixed assets. We did have some funds come in for contract prepayments. We also had a reduction in CDs as they were shifted around. So the net change on cash flow in the 6 months ended June 30th, it's only down 83,000 rather than down almost $1.5 million. Now, are we taking questions at the end, or?
We're gonna hold questions to the very end
Okay.
of the.
Okay, so if you have questions, we're going to have question and answer period at the end of the presentations.
Correct.
I'll be able to help you with if you have any questions.
Thank you, Pat. Our next speaker is Steve Loitz. He is currently the Cryonics Institute's vice president. He graduated from Michigan State with a bachelor's in logistics and a master's degree in finance. His professional career includes Kraft Foods, Chrysler Financial, and in 2009 became the president of an open dealer exchange joint venture between CDK and Reynolds to automate the vehicle purchase process. He has been one of the longest serving board members dating back almost 30 years and has attended every annual meeting since 1988. Steve is also active in financial planning, primarily for family and friends. His corporate and personal finance background has served CI well and has been generous with his insights and experience as a CI investment committee and inside auditor of CI's financial and accounting practices. He continues to reside in Michigan, only a few miles from the CI facilities, with his wife and 3 children. I thank you for all you do, all the work you do, and advice you give CI. Please welcome Steve.
Thank you, everybody. I assume everybody can see me okay, hear me okay? All right. I think my speaker is on. Joe, you good? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Yeah. Thanks for the introduction, Dennis. It's been a pleasure being part of the board for as long as I have. I think it does go back 30 years. I think 26 of those have been on the board. So I normally follow Pat. You know, he's a hardcore CPA, and we're very glad and appreciate everything he does. I try to translate things into layman terms. And so this year we were able to incorporate some of the layman comments into Pat's speech. So I'll be a bit shorter this time. But if everybody can see my screen there, you know, just reiterate what Pat said. Really, our balance sheet is solid and stable, and it certainly helps not to have any debt. And like Pat said, and when he was going through the financial statements, you just concentrate on the right columns. You know how we break it up between patient care and general operating expenses is nice from accounting, but from a membership, the main thing is just to look at the right-hand column. And you know, our land and our multiple buildings are paid for; they're undervalued. The economic value, as Pat said, the replacement value is much higher. So even our financial statements say we're strong. From an economic viewpoint, we're even stronger. You know, if you even look at the cryostats, which is our next most significant line item, they're likely to last for 70 years, maybe even longer. fiberglass lasts forever. We depreciate those over 7 years. So our expenses are accelerated. And I put expenses in quotes here because they're really not, they don't really depreciate as fast as we expense them for accounting purposes. We have over $10 million in investments, including 2.9 million in prepaids. I'm going to spend some more time on investments. As Pat mentioned, those investments took a hit. And so I wanted to walk through and give the memberships a feeling of confidence that a short-term dip is not a long-term problem. So really no debt other than the prepaids. From accounting standpoint, since those are refundable, we need to show those as a liability. So if I were to summarize things, looking at our income statement, it's predictable. We have prudent cost controls. I look at them monthly. A few of us look at them monthly. I typically ignore the monthly snapshots. Aren't that critical. We typically operate at break even or better. Our break even point, over the long term, if we were to get one human patient and a couple pets in any given month, that would typically give us a break even standpoint from an accounting perspective. Our cost, a majority, and in most organizations, our personnel costs run about 35%. Cryo related expenses are another 15. Facility was at 27. That's obviously going to tick up a bit now that we have a second facility that we're improving and depreciating. And if you look at our $10 million investment pool, given our long-term expense structure, anything over a 2% return is net positive. So the amount that we should be spinning off from dividends, interest, and capital gains should more than cover our cost. So again, a good, strong financial position. Changing a bit to our investments. About 5 years ago, we changed our investment approach from investment committee members picking favorite funds to a more objective approach by dividing dollars into two methods. And we have an unmanaged, which is heavily weighted towards equity markets, all index type funds, near zero cost Vanguard funds, and those are doing well as expected over the long run. And Joe Kowalski, who is a full-time seasoned professional, and Joe, maybe you just go off mute so you can chime in here from time to time. He also manages a book of funds for us, and we have slides on both of those. So the unmanaged funds, and I'll talk about those, as a majority of our equity portfolio, and they outmanage, if you want to say, champion versus challenger, 1 versus 2 here. The unmanaged outperformed for the first 3 years, but last couple of years, Joe has outperformed the unmanaged. So let's take a look. So we set up a target portfolio of about 85% stocks, 10% bonds. It's a little bit more dissected than stocks. We have some international. Matter of fact, I think I have. So in our current portfolio, we rebalance this about once a quarter. So that's due here in the next at the end of this month. I'll do some more rebalancing, try to get it back to its target allocation. So if you look, and this goes all the way back to 2016 when we opened up this Vanguard account, the blue there are the purchases and the withdrawals and the fund balances. You can see the investment returns with a dip with the pandemic, and then a more recent dip with all the supply chain issues that we're having. But over this course of time, in the top right corner, if you can see my mouse, it's our average annual rate of return has been 6.1%. A year ago, when I presented this, the average annual rate was 12%. So the recent downturn really hurt our annual rate of return. But again, it's at a point though where we're able to fund operations without dipping into capital. And I'll introduce Joe here, and then Joe does this full time, and he always likes me to show his numbers. So if anybody wants to talk to Joe in more depth, we have limited time here, and so he can't go into his trading methodologies explicitly, but he is available by phone, and I talk to him all the time. And Joe, here is, looking at one of our most recent allocations on your side, still heavily domestic stocks, writing several calls against it. But Joe, why don't you just talk about?
Yeah, I was going to jump in here because this doesn't actually give you the full picture. When it's domestic stocks on this, in this computer system, includes things like business development corporations, master limited partnerships, floating rate bonds, which trade on the exchange. Those are all included in domestic stock. And the nice thing about floating rate bonds is that as yields go up, interest rate yields go up, the yields on these floating rate bonds also goes up. So, we've got a lot of stuff that's wrapped into that domestic stock sub asset class.
If anybody wants to see our spreadsheet that we share every month, they're more than welcome to it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, happy to do that. This is going back to 2018. We had a change of methodology in 2020. I became a bit more conservative. And so what happened was we didn't make up quite as much, you see the pandemic loss. And because of the change of methodology, we didn't make up quite as much of that at the time. But since then, the method has really worked quite well. And you can see 58% annualized since we changed that method. I don't expect that or anywhere near that in general in the future. But if you take a look in the most recent year where we had actually a down year, do you have the last one, the other slide there?
I don't.
Okay. Well, in the most recent year, we were not down as much as the S&P. We were down, but we were not down as much as the S&P. So if we can be up more than the S&P 500 in the good years and not down as much in the bad years, that's a great, I think, a great way to go. The reason I think this is so important is that diversification, everybody knows about diversification, but people generally think about it in terms of what we have in the non-managed account, which is diversification amongst different stocks. When you go into a managed account, you have also diversification among method. And so we do things a little bit differently on my side. And we can also go into things that don't fall into any index category. And I mentioned them, master limited partnerships, which typically have very high dividend rates, 8-9%, and they're not fully taxable. Business development corporations, also high dividend rates. And during good times and bad times over the last 20 years, business development corporations have done very well. So the floating rate funds, which we're getting, sorry about the squirrel, we're getting about 7.5% on the floating rate funds currently, which is not quite up to what the current inflation rate is, but pretty darn good. And even though and this will be my last comment because I know we got a lot of things going on here, but even though the market has gone down in these last 6-8 months, whatever it is, and the managed account has also gone down, as I said, not as much as the market. But the nice thing about that is when you have things that pay such high dividends, they can reinvest, and we are reinvesting those dividends. So you're compounding at 7, 8, 9%. And even though the value of the underlying investment has gone down, you're buying these things at lower prices in this compounding. And so you end up over the longer term actually doing better because things have gone down in this time frame. So sometimes having things go down in the short term is actually beneficial to your investments in the longer term. And I think that's what we're going to continue to see with this. And again, if anybody wants to talk with me more in depth, I love talking about this stuff, and I'm happy to listen and explain and answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
I think my last comment, Dennis, before we hand it back over, is that we have good accounting controls in place. I've done some auditing on site remotely. Separation of duties, multiple signatures requires, anyone that has access to accounts are also members, and I think board members as well. So these funds are well protected, and we treat them as if they're our own. So I think that's a wrap for now, and we'll get to the questions at the end of the presentations.
Okay, thank you, Steve and Joe. Thank you very much. Again, if you guys have questions, please jot them down. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A and we can talk about it then. Our next speaker is Sayer Johansson. He is the Chief of Operations at Suspended Animation, where he's worked for over 8 years. He is a certified emergency medical technician and has worked on many standby and stabilization cases at SA. He would like to help explain the current and future capabilities of the Suspended Animation Service and how these services might help out members in times of need. Please welcome Sayer.
Hello, everybody out there in cryo land. Thank you, Dennis, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody at CI for putting this event on. I think it's a great thing for all the members to have this transparency and to be able to see everything that's going on with their organization. So let's get right into it. Share. So many of you probably know what suspended animation is. Many of you might be signed up with us. Suspended animation, for the best way for me to equate it to anything in the mainstream, we are the ambulance services for any member that is actually looking as their cryonic suspension is about to be imminent. We can fly anywhere in the continental United States. We have multiple capabilities locally in Southern California and Florida to attend to these members at their bedside, in a hospital, in a skilled nursing facility, wherever the situation may be. We can get to you in a relatively quick time. Our company tries to bring together science, technology, medicine, and cryonics under one roof. We are trying to make cryonics medicine far more mainstream medicine. We do a variety of research and development. Our bulk emphasis is on deployment and readiness. And then we also provide training, information. If anybody has questions or anything about our services, we're an open book. We encourage people to communicate with us. We encourage our members to communicate with us. It helps us understand our community so much better. So the main thing that everybody's concerned about with suspended animation is our ability to perform logistics, our ability to perform standbys, our ability to get our stabilizations done for our members in a timely fashion, and to do rapid transport for these members to their storage facility. I say storage facility because we also work with other organizations in the United States, but we do have a contract in place with the Cryonics Institute, and then we also have subsequent contracts with each individual member that wishes to have our services at the Cryonics Institute. So we are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. We have an emergency hotline phone number that you can call at any time, and somebody will be there to answer the phone. We have a call rotation where if so-and-so can't be reached, it just goes down a list. And we are 100% deployment ready at any moment in time. So what brings us all here? It's human cryopreservation. How do we get the most optimal cryopreservation? Well, it's really immediate interventions once a member is pronounced legally deceased. We cannot provide any services to any member that has not been pronounced legally deceased. We can deploy, we can be ready. We like to deploy and like to be ready at least 24 hours in advance of any member's ultimate cardiac arrest. So we cannot actually do any of our interventions until the patient is legally pronounced deceased in the eyes of the government, and then we can perform our duties. What does that mean? Well, when you call an ambulance service in mainstream medicine, they're going to send a flashing lights to whatever location you're at. They're going to do a basic assessment. They're going to do, if you're in cardiac arrest, they're going to do cardiopulmonary resuscitation. They're going to do ventilations. They might do medications. Some other aspects they may perform depending on where you're at is they might give you cold IV fluids. They might try to induce some form of a cool down on your core body temperature with ice packs. There's been research showing that if you can bring a patient's body temperature down even like a few degrees, it actually promotes the ability to recover from a cardiac incident or any other life-threatening incidents. So once they do these initial stabilizations, they're going to get you set for transport to get you to a hospital, where at the hospital they might do cooling catheter treatment to try to bring your temperature even lower so that you have a better possibility for recovery. And then they might perform bypass surgery, depending on how quickly you get there, and depending on what sort of state you're in. So what does suspended animation do for our patients? Well, in the eyes of mainstream medicine, our members are pronounced legally deceased. In our eyes, that is not the case. We are trying to do our best to minimize warm ischemia, to try to keep the body and the cells as alive and rejuvenated as possible. So we need to perform immediate interventions to similarly be as if you were still alive, breathing, had a cardiac beat. So we provide rapid and deep hypothermia. We're trying to minimize that warm ischemic time and trying to get this done as quickly as possible. How do we do that? Well, we're going to do very similar interventions. We're going to first set you up on a automated CPR device to keep blood circulating, to keep as much oxygen going to the periphery, to the cells as possible. We're going to hook you up to ventilations to try again to get oxygen going to all of the cells to minimize all of that ischemia. And then we're going to be introducing medications, be it anticoagulants, be it antibiotics. We have a whole proprietary cocktail of different interventions in that sense. And then where we transfer into our nuances, we will be introducing the patient into an ice water bath and prepping them for rapid transport. Rapid transport, maybe not to a hospital, but to perhaps one of our mobile surgical suites, or to a local funeral home where we might have an operating room ready and available for us to perform our ultimate stabilization prior to your ultimate transport to your cryonics storage facility. Once we get you transported to where we're going to be doing our main stabilization, we're going to be performing cardiopulmonary bypass and cold perfusion. We first start off by actually sanguinating all of the blood out of the patient and then introducing an organ preservation solution. It's not a cryoprotectant. Organ preservation solution is it's a non-toxic, it's a very inert substance that it's a proprietary composition that carries nutrients. It does exactly what we need to do to try to keep the cells and everything preserved for the immediate transport to the storage facility, where then a secondary perfusion can be attempted for cryoprotectant. The cold perfusion enables us to get all of that warm blood out, reperfuse with cold preservation solutions, so we can take a patient's body temperature far, far lower, far, far quicker than external cooling. Once we exsanguinate, we will actually do a cold perfusion that recirculates this perfusate throughout the patient, essentially cooling the patient from the inside using the patient's own vasculature. So how do we accomplish this? Well, a variety of ways. We need personnel, we need equipment, we need vehicles, we need facilities. We're the only ambulance service in the nation that actually has facilities. We have vehicles that are outfitted and designed for this service. So starting with the personnel portion, we do a little bit of recruitment. Recruitment's very difficult for us because our services are so erratic in the nature of the deployments, where we'll get called at any moment in time. I actually have done a stabilization on a patient at 12 o'clock midnight, New Year's Eve. It's very hard to find people that you can just call out of the blue and say, hey, I need some assistance. Can you drop everything? Can you care for your kids? Can you call your work and tell them you're not going to be there right now and come and give us some assistance? It's very hard to do recruiting. I do have some various contractors who have flexible schedules that are able to do that with me. But our bulk of our assistance comes by way of contracts. We contract out for surgical and perfusion services. They provide us coverage throughout the continental United States. It's actually a company that specializes in this for various hospitals, for various other groups, and they're called PDC, Perfusion Resources. They have personnel that are on call 24 hours a day, 365, very similar to us. Right now, we have four surgeons that are on staff that are willing to do cases with us. They are board certified, they're trained in mainstream medicine, and then they also undergo an additional training with our organization for all of the nuances as to the services we provide and the procedures we perform. So we also, in addition to the four surgeons, we have 12 cardiac perfusionists that are peppered throughout the United States, who are able to, at a moment's notice, just as the same as the surgeons, to give us assistance, give the surgeons assistance to provide these services to our members. In all, this company has been around for 18 years. This average number of cases, 10,000, it's gone up substantially. These are older numbers, but all of these people that I'm talking about are practicing medical professionals. That is the goal of suspended animation, is to provide educated and trained personnel to provide these standbys, where in the previous times it was volunteers, it was people that, albeit they're doing their best, they're trying their hardest to do the best for these members, but again, many of them laymen's, many of them in need of training. So the trainings that we provide, we do still provide these for our medical professionals, because we do have some nuances to our procedures. It's annual and it's comprehensive. Every year we do an annual training that it can last up to a week if we have enough personnel to bring. It generally consists of like 2 days of classroom orientation, and then we do a final day of an actual full pig practicum, which is we go to a USDA slaughterhouse and we actually euthanize a swine, and then we do our full procedure on a pig cadaver. We're able to take the temperature of the pig down, and we're able to quantify that and document all of the temperatures so that we have an understanding if what we're doing is up to snuff. Here's a picture of one of the pig trainings that we had. As you can see, there are far more people in the surgical suite than we would normally have. Generally, we try to keep things very small because we want to try to keep as much of a sterile environment as possible. But as this is training, we're going to have more people around so that we can get as much education passed out as much as possible. So as I said, all of our contracted personnel, they're practicing, they're contracted with us, and they are well trained, not just by suspended animation, but by the mainstream medical society as a whole. In 2008, we had a very limited presence. We had some equipment in California, we had some equipment in Southern Florida, and then piecemeal throughout the United States. We might have volunteers, we might have people that we could call that are sympathetic to the cause of what of the services we're trying to provide. As of 2022, we have a far better coverage. These are just the states with which we have medical professionals that we could potentially call, and they could get to a patient, do an assessment if we have the time to do an assessment. If there's no time, we will automatically deploy a team if we deem it necessary. So a team will be en route. I might be able to get somebody in one of these states who's might be a tad closer to get to the member quicker than us, so that they can start developing relationships, start performing some of the logistics that we need to cultivate. Because one of the biggest hangups for our services is when we get to a facility, we have to educate that whole facility right off the bat, because they've never heard of what we do, or they've heard of it, but they don't understand what all is involved. So building those relationships generally is what takes a large bulk of the time. And we have to do it prior to the patient's ultimate decline and ultimate cardiac arrest. So we also have state-of-the-art equipment that might be the tad a bit of a hyperbole. but we do have the equipment that is still used in mainstream medicine today, still used in surgical suites today. Top left is a Stryker sternal saw, uses a nickel cadmium battery, and it is tried and true. It's bulletproof. It works to do a sternotomy on any patient. On the right is the Sorin centrifugal pump circuit. It looks like a big gray box, but basically it is a bulletproof heart-lung bypass machine that we have 5 of that are positioned in our mobile operating vehicles. They are positioned in our deployment kits, ready to go at a moment's notice. They are what make our services possible. We also have some proprietary equipment. Top left is a stainless steel portable ice bath that actually collapses and folds into that little black bag that is about 3 feet by 3 feet by 8 inches. I'm able to get that heavy thing onto a plane. It just makes the minimum flight requirements so I can take it anywhere in the continental United States. It's what makes it possible for us to actually get a patient into that ice bath with a liner and get ice and circulating water so we can do external cooling on our patients. And then we have our automated CPR device. In some other organizations or in mainstream medicine, you might have heard of a Lucas, you might have heard of a Roscu device. This is a particular device that we utilize. Many search and rescue teams actually utilize this because it can be oriented in any sort of configuration, vertical, upside down, and it still performs good chest compressions. We like it because ultimately what we're going to be doing is a sternotomy, and as limited trauma to the sternum as possible is what we're looking for to make it a little bit better access for our surgeons. The Lucas has the tendency to be a little bit more traumatic to the sternum. And then we have combi tubes to do a rapid intubation if the patient isn't already intubated. We go with this combi tube. It's a very tried and true method that some EMTAs are even allowed to utilize in certain townships and whatnot. It's something where we don't have to use a laryngoscope. It's a lot easier to deploy this device appropriately. And then we have a Save 2 device, which is a military grade ventilation device that has been used by the United States military. They actually have a new revision of this. It's the Save 3 that came out not terribly long ago, but the Save 2 is still a tried and true device that is, again, rugged, bulletproof. This is what we're looking for. Once we get a patient with the initial stabilization, we're going to be implementing medications. Best way for us to do medications, not through an IV, which they can collapse, they can be pulled out. An intraosseous device is our best go-to. It gives us a very secure port to be able to push large volumes of medication through. The top left is called an EZ-IO. It's actually a drill with a metal tip catheter that you can pull out and then infuse medications through. The bottom is a similar device. It's a spring operated bone injection gun that is it's a single use, single try. We have it as a backup to the EZ-IO. And then we also in the top right have a backup to that, which is called a FAST. It's basically a sternum IO needle. We've never had to deploy this method, but again, it's redundancy that we're looking for. So we have that as an option. So the medications, once we start diving into it, we get the IO going, and then we will perform medications. These medications protocols have been looked over and dissected by a research committee and one of our sister companies, 21st Century Medicine, to hopefully provide us the best cocktail of things that we can put on board to the patient to give us the best form of an outcome for a cryopreservation. And then this would be our ischemia kit. We keep all of our medications in one single kit, separate from our standard deployment equipment. In each of these little tubes is one dose of each of the medications we provide. We compartmentalize it out so that it's quick to draw up. It's relatively dumbed down so that we can just get things going as quickly as possible in the event that we need to be drawing these medications up very rapidly for a patient who is in imminent decline. And then ultimately, this is what a setup would look like. You're actually looking down on a ice bath. The gray liner is our ice bath liner, and that's waterproof so that we can put ice and water inside of that to do external cooling. The life band that you see there is hooked up to the cardiopulmonary device, AutoPulse, underneath the patient, so it's able to do chest compressions. On top of the patient's head, that blue device or that blue piece of plastic that you see is actually a squid mask that is hooked up to a sump pump that pumps ice water from the foot of the ice bath up over the head of the patient to try to get the head and the brain cooled as quickly as possible, because that is our main goal, is to get that brain cooled so that we have as minimal ischemic damage to that brain tissue as possible to give us the best possible outcome for a cryopreservation and later on a reanimation. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a bunch of syringes. That is a syringe rack that I custom designed for our medications protocol so that everything lines up perfectly. It's just, you can, once the IO is set, you can start pulling syringes, pushing the medication, and keep going. And you'll notice in the foreground, there is a camera. All of our personnel on the casework has body cams so that we can see what each individual member is doing. It's reviewed after each case. It is documented after each case, and it's written up in our case reports and gives us our best metrics for understanding what's gone wrong, what can we improve, what can we do better. And it gives us troubleshooting. If something does go wrong, we can assess, well, why did that happen? And then the other in the foreground is a white rack with a surgical tray on there. Once the time for surgery is upon us, we can deploy that for our surgeons to have easy access to the equipment. So we have 3 air transportable kits. By air transportable, I mean all of our surgical equipment, all of our ice bath, everything is positioned in 14 Pelican cases that weigh 700 pounds total. We have to get that onto a commercial airliner so that we can fly anywhere in the continental United States to get to a patient. We have 3 of these full kits stocked and ready to go. At a moment's notice, we can get to any airport that we need to get to and get moving. Now, we also have 2 vehicles that can support surgery. These are essentially a full kit inside of a vehicle. That's our vehicle in Florida. It's a large box truck that we have out there. It's perfect for doing our trainings. As you can see in here, this is what a setup for a surgery would be. It's very spacious. We like to only keep around 3 personnel in there at a time during surgery. Again, to limit the contamination of the sterile field. And then this is what it looks like inside there when it's just sitting ready and wait for us to go on a deployment. Everything's clean, everything's ready to go. There's very little setup time so that we can get moving. And then this is our vehicle in Southern California. It's slightly smaller. The reason for that is in Southern California, we do have some tighter areas like in Los Angeles County, San Diego County, where we need a little bit more mobility. And as you can see from the back, it is fully stocked, it is sterile, it is ready to go at a moment's notice, but it is very much smaller. We are able to get 3 personnel in there, a surgeon, perfusionist, and then a assistant, but it is a very tight situation. So stabilization, surgery, and perfusion, that is what we do. We are able to deploy nearly anywhere in the United States at a moment's notice. We are on call and ready to go. This is a small video about our surgeon, I believe that's Dr. Wesley, actually doing an open heart bypass. It is a tight situation, very close quarters, but he is very much a professional and he gets the cannulations done extremely quickly. Anybody can attest. So facilities where we keep these vehicles, we have 1 facility in California, we have 1 facility in Florida. The facility in Florida is predominantly for training and our Eastern response. Because the vehicle is bigger, it makes it a lot better to use for training. We can get more personnel in there and we can educate a larger amount of people. And then the Eastern response, depending on how much time we're given, we've driven that vehicle from Southern Florida to Washington, DC. We've driven it up to, I think, Pittsburgh. If we're given enough time, we can get those vehicles to where we need to have them because we prefer to have them. They have redundancy equipment. We're able to have a lot more backup equipment because we're not limited on space on getting on a plane. And we know that they're clean. Not to say that a lot of funeral homes aren't exactly the most sterile of environments, but they're not up to our standards. So whenever we can get these vehicles to where we're going, that's what we prefer. So it's a very small facility. We keep the vehicles indoors, temperature controlled. We do have sterile packaging and everything in there. So we want to keep that in a controlled environment as much as possible. And then you can see that we actually do a lot of fabrication as well there in Florida. I have an industrial engineer that's local that can do some of the fabrication for us. And then in California, we have the smaller vehicle. It's our basis for our administration and research and development. We have a sister facility out here that we do some researching with. This is where we keep up our relations and do all of the administrative work with patients' information and everything. And it's also our basis for our Western response. This is a very small shop as well. You can see it's a kind of a tight fit to get that vehicle in there. And then this is our lovely conference room area. And it's the perfect size to keep ourselves as a smaller, low profile, but still keep us deployable at any moment. So what does it take to be with suspended animation? You have to be a professional person. You have to be very flexible, and you have to be a team player. You have to be able to get along with all sorts of personalities. Like I said, when we go to different cases, one of the biggest obstacles we have is developing relationships. And you have to be a good communicator, and you have to be a good relations person to be able to cultivate those types of relationships so that we can get these services provided to our personnel. Privacy and confidentiality is the utmost for our members. We utilize a HIPAA compliant database that is cloud-based. A lot of smaller practices use it. A lot of veterinary offices use it. It is HIPAA compliant. We keep all of our documentation encrypted and saved on there. We also keep an encrypted solid state drive back at the office in a safe that we keep all of the documentation on as well, that is under lock and key and under protection. We don't want any of our patients' information getting exposed anywhere, and we are utmost confident that we are doing everything possible to try to keep everybody's information as confidential as possible. And that is it for suspended animation. I'm sure there's going to be some questions, but we'll save those to the end. And thank you very much for listening to my spiel.
If you get a chance to hold on to the end, there might be some questions for you later than it's there, as well as Steve and Joe, if you guys are still hanging on. Our next speaker, though, is Eric Voigt from the International Cryomedicine Experts. Eric is a co-founder. He has been involved in the cryonics industry since 2010. He has provided SST, standby stabilization and transport, in over 30 cases worldwide, and was interviewed on the HBO series Pause with Sam and Jay about his cryonics journey as well. He has a paramedic license of 26 years, as well as developing risk management planning and safety training for his risk activities. He also manages teams of safety professionals and on-site medical services for construction and other industries. Eric's company aims to help provide SST to CI members in need and around the world. Please welcome Eric.
Thanks, Dennis. First of all, I really appreciate the invite here. I know that we have been at this general meeting in the past in person, and we really like the interaction with everybody. Please feel free, if you see me around, to ask me any questions. I know the stuff that we do, there's a lot of things that are not very clear, especially when it's some of the challenges when it comes to SST, and I'm more than happy to answer those questions for you. So you heard Sayre talk a little bit about SST. We do something very similar to suspended animation when it comes to the standby stabilization transport. So for those of you who don't know what SST is, I kind of just want to quickly go over that. Basically, the standby piece of it is us waiting for deanimation to occur. And I think this is one of the things that is important to understand when it comes to logistics, is that we need to be there early. We need to be there before deanimation, ideally before deanimation occurs. You know, just as you heard Sayer talk about logistical challenges when it comes to commercial airlines, transportation, how, you know, are we going to drive there? You know, what type of situation are we going to encounter as far as delays when we're driving? And all of these things play a big factor when it comes to a chronics patient. When we're talking about time, time is a very big factor. For us to get there early is extremely important. The stabilization part, you saw a little bit about the stabilization. I'll talk about a little differences, some things that we do here at ICE that's different from suspended animation when it comes to the stabilization piece. But essentially, the stabilization is the cool down, the medication administration, the circulation, and that's all the things that we would do after legal pronouncement. And then the transportation piece of it is another logistical challenge. If you think about where we go, we are an international company. We transported patients from all over the globe. In fact, there's a few of them that are here in Cryonics Institute that we transported from around the world. And that presents some real big challenges when it comes to logistics. If you think about trying to get somebody to a facility where you can introduce the cryoprotectant, how big of a logistical challenge is that, especially when we're talking about Cryonics Institute here, or if there's an Alcor patient or tomorrow biostasis patient, you know, where are they located in comparison to those facilities where they could get cryoprotectant introduced? And that's a real big challenge. Next slide, please. So the standby piece of it is really, we want to be there as close to legal pronouncement as possible. And I mentioned that for us to get there, depending on where you are, that's a huge challenge. This is really the difficult part, is when we're determining when deanimation will occur. For us, ideally, we would like to be there several days in advance so we can take a look at the location, make sure that we have the arrangements set up with the local funeral home, the transportation, dry ice, our equipment is, we get our equipment there. We do something a little different when it comes to field cryoprotecting, and I'll talk about that. But all of these things take time. For us, really, the challenge is when we get called and say, this person is deanimating here within the next couple of hours, or even worse, they just passed away an hour ago. For us, that's a big challenge. We have to scramble. We have to make those arrangements to try to get all of our equipment to the location. And in the meantime, there's some warm ischemia going on, right? And that's what we're really trying to prevent. So it's very difficult to predict when that's going to happen, right? Sometimes it's very sudden. Other times we have some warning. In those times where we do have some warning, we really would like to get that advance notice for us to get dispatched to that location. Being conservative is really the best approach, right? You want to be conservative when it comes to that. You don't want to gamble when it comes to that time when you're predicting deanimation. You don't want to say, well, we know it's going to happen here within the next 3 or 4 days. We're just going to wait till maybe a couple of days before, because you're going to be surprised. And the fact that sometimes it does happen when it's unexpected, even though we know that deanimation is going to occur within a certain amount of time, sometimes it happens right away. The time and the temperature is the big thing for us. The time for warm ischemia and the temperature. We want to make sure that we're getting that patient down to cold temperatures. We're going to use wet ice initially to try to get as cold as possible to try to remove some of that heat. Next one, please. The stabilization piece of it, like Sayer said, it's the rapid cooling and the medication administration along with CPS. It's very similar to CPR, except we're not trying to resuscitate. We're just trying to circulate all those medications and try to remove some of the heat with the cold ice bath. We talk about the organ preservation and the field washout. That's a technique that is used as standard in the cryonics industry. Sayer mentioned about how they do that with a surgeon perfusionist. We do something a little different. I'm going to get into the field cryoprotectant here in just a bit. But if you think about the organ preservation and the washout, you're really just buying a little bit of time to get that patient to an OR for the introduction of the cryoprotectant. And that piece of it is the unknown also. When we talk about if you are not next to the cryonics facility, if you don't deanimate next to the cryonics facility, we still have some logistical challenges of getting that body across state lines, transit permits. If you deanimate on a Friday, you may not get a transit permit until Monday. And so how does that affect that patient when it comes to introducing cryoprotectant? There might be some prolonged time there. The standby requires a surgeon, a perfusionist, like Sayer had mentioned. And so there's some other logistical challenges of getting everybody there all at the same time, especially if they're coming from different parts of the country. Next slide. Go ahead, one more. I'm sorry. The transport. This is really where I think there's a lot of misconception when it comes to the transport piece of it. How do we get that patient from that location where we are, whether they've had cryoprotectant introduced or not, to the facilities, to the storage facility? Really what this boils down to is the time management piece of it if there is not cryoprotectant at the patient's bedside. If you're doing a field washout with organ preservation fluid, you are still under the clock. There's a clock ticking in order for them to have enough time to get that patient to the OR to introduce the cryoprotectant. We are going to transport to Cryonics Institute. The cryoprotectant perfusion is going to occur there. And then the cool down is going to occur for long-term storage. Ideally, that's how the situation goes, right? You deanimate in a time and a place that is convenient, so where we can have the team there very rapidly. We can perform the standby and stabilization, and then we can get the patient to the facility, Cryonics Institute, in a very quick manner. The problem, again, with that is the logistical challenges. I can tell you just as many cases that I've done, and my partner, Aaron Drake, has done over 90 cases. There is always some sort of challenge when it comes to logistics. And in fact, most of the time that we spend either before or after the case is working on the logistics. How do we get the patient to the facility in a timely manner? If we're bound to some constraints when it comes to the cryoprotectant, it means even more. Now we're under a 72-hour window, which we have to really be very good at our jobs when it comes to the logistics. What we do a little different is we do field cryoprotectant. This is going to occur either at the patient's bedside or at a funeral home, which provides us a space to do that. In a normal situation, if you come back here to the Cryonics Institute, they're going to perfuse that over a period of 2 hours or so, because there's machines that are pumps that are involved that they can do that. But we do things a little different, and I'll get into that. Next slide, please. So a typical outcome, if you're not thinking about field cryoprotectant, is either you will receive a full standby and stabilization along with an organ preservation washout. You will get timely transportation to the facility in order to introduce the cryoprotectant. Ideally, that's how it goes, right? If you do not have the ideal situation in which now you cannot get either the standby team there, the surgeon or the perfusionist, or the cryoprotectant there, then most likely scenario will be a straight freeze. And we've all heard of that before. We have all seen it. We've been part of those situations in the past where we weren't dispatched in time and it ended up being a straight freeze. And unfortunately, there wasn't the forethought of sending us there ahead of time. And we want to try to prevent those straight freezes. And especially when it comes to the capabilities of field cryoprotectant, now we've just expanded that time frame in which we now have those logistical challenges mitigated by when it comes to bringing the patient back to Cryonics Institute. Next slide, please. So what is FCP? Has anybody heard of that before? Have you heard of FCP? FCP is field cryoprotectant. So when I talk about the cryoprotectant introduced at the Cryonics facility, that is done there with the pumps, perfusing the body with the cryoprotectant. What I'm talking about is our team actually brings that cryoprotectant with us as we go to the cases. So that means that we take all of our equipment that you saw, some of the equipment that Sayer had put up there on his slides. We take all of that equipment, but we also take cryoprotectant with us. We are able to perfuse the head and the brain with cryoprotectant without being in an operating room. So that means we do not need to come back to the facility to introduce cryoprotectant. What does this mean? Really what this means is now we have bought a lot of time. We're now removing that blood from the brain, we're removing that water, and we're introducing a cryoprotectant. We are cooling also. So we have a heat exchanger on there in which now we're cooling the fluid, the cryoprotectant, as we're infusing it into the brain. And then after we do that, now we can package the patient in dry ice. The dry ice piece of it, if you think about a straight freeze, sometimes we'll put a patient on just straight dry ice and a straight freeze because we don't have that time to be able to get them back into the facility. For us, after we introduce the cryoprotectant, now we've bought all the time that we need. Now we can put the patient on dry ice and the patient's head and brain will be protected now with cryoprotectant. For us, international cases, this is a perfect solution for us because obviously getting from another country back here to Michigan is very difficult. But if we're able to do FCP, it doesn't matter how long we take. We could take a week or longer if we need to, as long as we have an ample supply of dry ice. And this is the real big difference that we think when it comes to how we manage patients. ICE really thinks about it a little differently in that we want to bring the entire team, the entire operating room to that patient's bedside. And we want to be able to perform those procedures there at the location which the patient deanimates, rather than having to worry about the time constraints of getting them back into here to Cryonics Institute. Next one, please. So the field cryoprotectant, we've reduced the time between legal death and the start of cryoprotectant. We're not bound to those times now of rushing, getting a transit permit, trying to figure out the logistics, commercial airlines, or how are we going to do that? How are we going to figure out how to get the body back to CI to be able to do the introduce the cryoprotectant? Now we just bring it with us and we're able to do it right there. The standby remains exactly the same. There's no changes in that. We show up with a team with all of our equipment. We wait for legal pronouncement to occur. The cryoprotectant is introduced in a gradual manner. It's cooled, like I said, through a heat exchanger. We take our refractive index readings to make sure that we're getting the right concentrations. So as we infuse more concentrated cryoprotectant, we're measuring that as it's coming out to the vertebrals, and we're measuring to see how much of the brain it actually is perfused. And then we control those flow rates by different gauges. We try to achieve 80 millimeters of mercury as far as the pressure is concerned, and it's all gravity fed. So we don't need any electricity. We can, the pump that we use runs on electricity only to circulate the cold water through the heat exchange. But as far as the perfusion piece of it, we don't need a pump. We don't need a perfusionist. We don't need any of that because we're using a gravity fed system. It's a very simple setup, but it's very effective. Next slide. So really what we're talking about is stopping the time. With FCP, we are able to stop the time that it takes for us to get the patient from whatever location they are back to CI. And we're allowed the patients to be able to cool to dry ice temperatures to buy us that time. And now we can figure out the logistics on how to get back here. It seems very simple, but I can tell you that, again, most of the cases that we've been on, there's always been some sort of challenge, especially when it comes to the transport. And for us, buying that extra time allows us to figure out those logistical challenges. And it's helped out quite a bit. Just a quick story. We also contract with Alcor. Alcor is one of our clients, and we do a lot of their standby stabilization for their members. As you know, Alcor does a neuroseparation. They have an option to do neuroseparation in which they will cryopreserve just the brain only inside the head. And we are the team that goes out there and does the field cryopreservation, introduce the cryoprotectant. We will do the neuroseparation and we will take the cephalon back to Alcor. If you can just imagine traveling with a head in a case through commercial airlines and how difficult that can be sometimes, we now with FCP are able to work through those things. We're not under a real time constraint in getting the patient back to Alcor in order to do the cryoprotectant. And so for us, it really buys us a lot of time. It doesn't matter if it's a neural patient or a whole body. It really does buy us a lot of time to be able to figure out some of these logistical challenges. Next slide, please. There are a couple of shortcomings when it comes to FCP. If you think about, the number one, the number of cases that we have to take with us. There's a large amount of Pelican cases. So our team is, we're racking up $800 of extra baggage charges on the plane. It's a lot of cases there. But the temperature and pressure, concentration, the dry ice dependent, and the cephalon perfusion, those are all real challenges for us in that we have to think about these things ahead of time. We cannot do FCP without dry ice. We have to have a dry ice supply in order for us to be able to do that. Otherwise, we're back to square one and getting the patient back to Cryonics Institute to do the perfusion if we don't have a dry ice supply. Luckily, most places that we've been to have a plentiful dry ice supply. We've partnered with a few welding supply stores or gas stores that supply dry ice. And believe it or not, we have also gotten dry ice from grocery stores. And we will buy out their entire supply of dry ice at the grocery store to be able to cool the patient. It's the concentration of the cryoprotectant isn't as refined or isn't as controlled as much as it is when you're using a pump. So we're trying to mix the concentrations a little bit. But so far from the evidence that I've heard is that the perfusions have been very good. Alcor has been doing some CTs on the cephalons and have shown very positive results when it comes to FCP. We're really looking forward to seeing more information when it comes to FCP because we really do think that it is a superior way of doing the perfusion. Next slide, please. I know there were some questions earlier that I had about the teams that we have and who we use. We unfortunately, with the other business that I have, we hire EMTs, paramedics, and nurses. And so we have a variety of different contractors that are located throughout the United States. We are in Hawaii, we are in Florida, California, Arizona, Texas, North Carolina. And those people are able to respond around the country. We are partnering also with a company in Canada to be able to provide services to Canadian membership. And we will hopefully soon be able to provide additional support to Canadians who are also members, and that we will have equipment and cryoprotected in Canada ready to deploy. So I mentioned some of those challenges that we have when it comes to logistics. One of those is getting cryoprotectant and the equipment across the borders. It's been very difficult in the past, and so we're trying to strategically place equipment and cryoprotectant in areas in which we don't have to cross the border and go through customs. And so expanding our capabilities to Canada is one of the important things that we're working on right now, because there is a large membership, both CI and Alcor in Canada too. I can tell you also that we are looking at storing more cryoprotectant in our facility. We have storage for us that we store cryoprotectant in. I know right now we have VM1. M22 is an Alcor specific one, but we want to be able to send the VM1 with our team wherever they go. And so we're trying to build up our supply of not only kits, but also VM1 to be able to do field cryoprotectant in an even more timely manner. So we're working on just a couple of things to try to make the logistics a little easier. We've had a lot of lessons learned over for me, over 30 cases, there's been a lot of lessons learned. And for us, again, the logistical challenges are the big ones for us. We've learned a few different tricks when it comes to working with local funeral homes and morticians when it comes to providing the space to do field FCP. And it's worked out very well. We are also offering our services to any Cryonics organization, not only CI, Alcor, but Tomorrow by Stasis, Southern Cryonics, Aaron Drake, who is my partner in this business, also works with a company in China, Yinfeng in China. He's also working with a company in Thailand, and we're going to provide our services to any and all companies. It doesn't matter who they are. Again, we think that FCP is a capability that allows us to break down some of these very difficult challenges that we have when it comes to time and temperature. It just allows us to be there on the spot when deanimation occurs, to be able to give the best cryopreservation possible. That's all I have. My contact information, I think I put it up here also. If you'd like it, my business card, I can have some, I'll put some out here. Feel free to contact me with any questions that you have. I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Eric. Our next speaker is Dr. Don Kleinzik. He's a PhD and founder of and president of Jerry Gene. He has done work on nutrition, aging, and caloric restriction. Don has spoken about pharmaceutical targets for age-related disease based on gene discovery that includes the cross-linking theory of aging, originally created by Dr. Johann Borkstein. Dr. Kleinzik has even worked with Nobel laureate Linus Pauling, at the Borkstein Research Foundation. Kleinzik's degrees in chemistry, physiological chemistry, cell biology, hormone action, and molecular genetics have prepared him to go on and investigate new possibilities in these fields. Among his advances to date are the discovery of cholesterol-lowering agents that altered cell senescence. His firm Jerry Gene Medical Corp is a front runner in the area of gerontological genetics and how to prolong life through genetic engineering. As a CI member and a scientist, he wants to share his knowledge with us and help guide us into best practices in preparing and pursuing for research that will benefit the Cryonics mission. Please welcome Dr. Kleinzik.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm going to present just a short discussion about aging, maybe some recent advances, where the field I feel it should go. And we'll end up with a short discussion on maybe forming an advisory board for Cryonics Institute dealing with cryonics and recent advances. I'd like to start out with a proposal to the audience. Is aging, which is a universal phenomenon for all species, is aging a programmed event or is it random, caused by DNA mutations, cell errors in metabolism? So is it random or is it programmed? How many are for random accumulation of errors? And how many are for program? Okay, so I lean towards the program. When I formed Jerry Gene over 20 years ago, we had a Rageous technology which looked at differential gene expression between young and old tissues, and we were seeing differences. And I was hopeful at that point of finding master genes, gene switches that would say off and on for old age or young age. And recently there are some transcription factors out there which can be considered master genes that might be performing that. But before I get into that, I'd just like to go backtrack a little about damage. The reason I feel DNA damage and other errors in metabolism are not the answer or the cause of aging. It's been around forever. They've been shoving antioxidants to us for 50, 60 years. There's no good literature out there that says antioxidant consumption will increase longevity or lifespan. But I think the crowning jewel of this all is when you do cloning. So if you take an old cell that supposedly is damaged beyond repair or getting towards senescence and clone it into a new sheep or a new animal, that animal comes back young as ever. So all this DNA damage, if it was that bad, I don't think would translate into a total DNA repair or cellular repair. And we're going to have a new sheep that's as young as a controlled sheep. So I think that type of experimentation done in the last 10 to 20 years really stirred me away from looking at anything with free radicals and this sort of thing to a program, a cellular program, just like we grow up from a little infant to adolescence to mid-adult age. Okay. That's all programmed event. That's not due to random damage. And who's to say that from mid-adult age to the failing years is also not just a tapering off of the cellular program. Outrageous technology gave us a little insight. And then there's clocks out there. So the telomeres came around, which I will say now, and I've said forever, is not the cause of aging. There's indirect consequences of it because with any pathway in our system, there's all these cross pathways going all different, all convoluted ways, and the telomeres are going to get involved. Having said that, we know that telomeres, as they get shorter, cause replicative senescence. Replicative senescence now has been shown in vivo to cause zombie cells, and there's drugs, senolytics, that can get rid of these zombie cells and maybe give you up to 20, 30% lifespan extension, which is significant, but it's not the answer. I don't want to be 120. I want to be 1,020. So I don't want to just hit that genetic barrier. I want to go way beyond that, which I think when we understand totally cellular programming, we will be able to do. So what's some of the evidence for all this cellular programming? I think there's a couple of key papers. Yamanaka came out with the Yamanaka factors back in 2010, which could take an adult cell like a fibroblast, which is a skin cell, and go backwards, do partial reprogramming with 4 transcription factors. And this would get this fibroblast that loses its identity. It's no longer a fibroblast. It's just another cell. It's getting down to a pluripotent state, as they would say, which means we could add back factors in vitro to these cells and turn it into a neuron or eye cell or back to a fibroblast. Now, is that really reversing aging? I don't know at this point, but it's quite sexy, I would say. So these Yamanaka factors, we know David Sinclair has been working with these as well. He's been able to crush retinal neurons in mice and then add 3 to Yamanaka factors back to partially reprogram that area. And these neurons will grow back, and restore the ability for the mice to see. And even in wild type mice without crushing the neurons, there was more visual clarity with putting the Yamanaka factors. And they would do it by injecting it to the vitreous humor, and these factors would get into the retinal area. So that was a pretty nice paper. There's another one by Riken and colleagues over in England last year where they've taken cells and they've put the Yamanaka factors in a petri dish with them for about 13 days straight. And they got it to the point where it would almost be unprogrammed totally, but not quite. It still had the identity of a cell that it started out with. And they could start seeing more youthful expression, say of the fibroblasts of collagen and this sort of thing. The fishy thing about all these things, as we know, even with the statins that I helped develop years ago, even 30 years later, there's conflicting stories out there. So with Riken and his colleagues, if he incubates for 15 days with these factors, all of a sudden the cells turn back into an older cell type. So I don't quite understand. You think if you were flourishing with young rejuvenating factor, another 2 days would actually make it go back the wrong way. And then there was a lot of individual variability where some people didn't show this. So it's maybe a little crack in the window, a little silver lining that there's some smoke here, but the fire we're not at yet. So those sort of things are very good. Now, a time clock, as I was talking about, telomeres are beautiful if they really were to answer, because every cell division you'd lose X amount of nucleotides at the end of the chromosomes, and after 50, 60 cell divisions, the cell can't function anymore. It turns into a zombie cell, starts secreting proteases and eating up the connective tissue around it. So we could just count, and then we activate telomerase to get those ends back onto the chromosome. There's no proof of that, and I don't think it's going to happen. But time clocks would be great. So now Horvath out of UCLA comes along with one in, I think, 2012, 2013. Well, and one of the ways of showing this was doing parabiosis, in which he joined young and old mice together. And the old mice made the young mice a little older, and the young circulation got the old to meet in the middle. So basically they met at mid-adult. So there's like, are the old factors causing young mice to get older with some of this, or vice versa? But in the meantime, he looked at the chromatin of these mice, and he determined that methylation patterns are very important. So the more methylated the chromatin is, the less gene expression. The less methylated or demethylated the chromatin is, the more gene expression. And of course, I know that from my background in molecular genetics, chromatin is a tightly wound ball of protein and DNA and other factors. And it can't be like this if you're going to express a gene. It has to have an open architecture, so all the transcription factors and other necessary coenzymes or what have you can get into the promoter region, which is the start of the gene, and express that gene. So boy, this looks great. We can look at methylation patterns, and that'll tell us if we're young or old. In fact, Sinclair, I don't know if he was saying it in jest or not, but he's taken NMN and resveratrol and several other small molecules in which he claims he's getting younger. He's about 52 and he looks really good for his age, but he said his clock was about 60 years of age until he took these small molecules over the last several years. And now he's more in the mid 30s. I don't know if he was joking or not, because if that's the case, let's see the literature on it. But it would be, I think, in a minute, but it would be a beautiful solution if we could reprogram our older cells simply with small molecules, such as NMN, which is the precursor to making ATP. And once you have high energy levels in your cells, a lot of different gene expression occurs, a lot of good things occur. So it's something to keep your eye out on. So we have the Yamanaka factors, we have the young blood, which is due to the peribiosis, the joining of the young and old circulation, that are showing a reversal of this methylation pattern. But we always have to look at the weeds, you know, you got to go really deep in the weeds to understand all of this. You not only have methylation, you have acetylation, you have post-translational modification of the histones that wind in which the DNA is wound around. And there's many other factors involved in keeping that open architecture for proper gene expression. So I think science is starting to get on the cusp of looking more and more away from damage and more towards cellular programming. And I think these recent advents in science are really important steps. They still could be off. I'll still put up the position that, oh, fine, we can undifferentiate a cell and we can redifferentiate a cell. Really show me that gives you youth. But I don't want to be quite that cynical, because I think this opens up a lot of more research into the area, and just looking at differential gene expression as a function of age, in the end will tell all. So it's really a good field to go towards. Then the last part of the little discussion here is Cryonics Institute would like to develop a advisory board on cryonics. So when we have an annual meeting, one of us can get up and say, here's what's transpired in the last year in any of the steps of cryopreservation, whether it's the cryoprotectant or step one, the transport or what have you. And I would like to have invitation for anyone in the audience that would like to talk to me later about being on the board or just being an advisor. They read articles and they would like to let CI know about it. So that's about it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, more to that point, we're revising the scientific advisory board, and we're going to put some highly credentialed, smart individuals on that board to look at the peer-reviewed journals and to see what's new, not just from a lay person's perspective, but see what's new in the out into the educational world and try to bring some of that back and make sure that we're pointing our dollars and our efforts in the right direction as far as our research dollars and so forth. Make sure we're not going down the wrong path, and make sure we're going down the right path, and if nothing really much is happening, we're at least staying the course where we should be. So thanks, Don. Looks like they're getting our dinner, our lunch, dinner ready, and so we'll be breaking for that in a little bit. In the short period before that, I'd really like to thank everyone that helped put this together. Thank you for my technical support team, Doug, Ian, and Lauren. Thank you guys very much. Couldn't have done it without you. Also, I'd like to talk about our newest staff member at Cryonics Institute, Branson Peacock. Could you stand up, please? Branson Peacock is our perfusionist and administrative assistant. He's been in the funeral industry for over 20 years as a embalmer, and so he's got a lot of experience, and he's been trained on our machines, and he's so you might hear or see of him on the phone or through emails. So thank you, Branson. And also I'm going to have Andy come up and talk a little bit about what's going on. For those of you who might have seen the new building, the CI West over there, we're expanding. We're moving into a new building. We're getting that ready to start accepting patients, and we're really close right now. Andy, did you want to stand up and talk a little bit about that, or just give a few points on that? Thanks, Andy. I was gonna hand out the vote list.
The results.
Yeah, I did. This is the final. Yep, matches up.
Okay, Dennis asked me to put down a few things that we've done over the last year. And the new facility, the second building, it is ready to take patients right now. We've got 5 cryostats in there. We moved a 3,000 gallon tank from the main building to the second building, and we replaced that one with the 6,000 gallon tank because the capacity, it went from about six weeks capacity down to less than 2 for liquid nitrogen. But now the new tank at 6,000 gallons, it gives us a month's supply of liquid nitrogen at the main building. And a 3,000 gallon tank, we really don't need that right now because we're not storing anybody in the second building, but we will soon. We've got room for probably 5 more patients in the main building before we have to use the second building. We'll continue to perfuse out of the first building, and we'll just do the storage in the second building. And we've got all the vacuum jacketed liquid nitrogen supply lines installed in the second building, and that one's ready to go. And we also had the parking lot replaced at the new building because it was deteriorated to the point where we couldn't even get a forklift in and out of it anymore. And it's all done with 8-inch reinforced concrete. And that's because we're going to have the tanker trucks that'll drive over it. So we had to go extra heavy on that. And so far, we've over the past year, we've gotten 4 cryostats, fiberglass ones, and 2 stainless steel ones. And we have 4 more fiberglass ones on order and 1 more stainless steel one on order. 2 of the fiberglass ones we should probably have within a month, probably sooner. And then the following 2 by the end of the year. The stainless steel one probably by the end of the year, possibly early 2023 on that one. And at the second building, we actually had to have the downspouts put into a main drain and then piped out into the catch basin in the parking lot because the in between the buildings was getting saturated because our building and the neighbor's building have roofs that slope together. The rain was building up, the water was building up between the 2 buildings, and the foundation was always wet. So we had the neighbors that do the contracting work pipe the water into the storm drain. So now that's dry, so we don't have a problem with that anymore. And we had So far this year, we've had 13 patients, which is about on track for, it's actually a little bit ahead of normal. And I don't know what the count on the members is, but just looking at what we're taking in for the memberships and stuff, it's about normal as well. I did some checking. A few people want to know about liquid nitrogen, what we're going to have if there was a possibility of generating our own. And it's always been expensive, but it is something that's doable. I contacted a place that does sell liquid nitrogen generators and talked to them for a bit. The cost is, they gave a cost of $432,000 for the generator, but then you have to have a compressor and you have to have a separator, a few other things. Bottom line is on it, it's gonna be at least $500,000 to try to generate your own liquid nitrogen. Or I shouldn't say to try, to be able to do it. There's gonna be service every year on it. There's a 1-year service. The guy said a 3-year, a 5-year. That'll run a few $1,000s, so you can expect a little bit more maintenance on that. They said that it'll last roughly 30 years is what they're expecting. It'll produce anywhere from 150 to 290 gallons of liquid nitrogen per day. I don't know why there's such a big variation. He didn't explain that. But on the high end, it could supply our demand for the main building. The problem is that the problem one is the cost, and it's really not necessary. And this is just being done just to see in case of an emergency, could we do our own, which we could. But the liquid nitrogen, then the supply, the cost goes from about $130 a day, what we're buying, up to about $360 or $306 a day if we make our own. So you're more than doubling the cost plus the investment in it. So, and it would take, I asked him if we wanted to order one, how long would it take? It's about 5-month lead time on getting it. So I don't know if it's worth doing. It was talked about is just in case we couldn't get a liquid nitrogen supply. What would keep us from getting liquid nitrogen supply? I don't know. It could be a big power failure could do it, but if that kept them from our producers from producing, it would also keep us from producing, unless of course we got a generator, then we'd need a fuel tank. So I don't know. We can look into it more if we want to, but it is a possibility. It's an expensive possibility, but it is something that could be done. And that's really about the main things that's been going on. Everything's felt like normal and nothing exciting other than that. So if questions, anybody has questions, or if you want to do questions later about it. All right.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, Andy, as well as Mike, if you want to stand up as well. Mike has been helping out with the building. Okay, so what do you guys think? You think I should give the election results now or after dinner? Now? After dinner? Okay. All right. So quickly, I'd like to congratulate our newest board director member, Jim Burrell. Got the highest amount of votes at 132 votes. Congratulations, Jim. Could you stand up? I'm talking about you. You don't mind, I want to read your bio real quick. That was off his candidates list. He's from Minnesota, Minneapolis. Served 30 years in senior management in the medical device and pharmaceutical industry. Worked in regulatory and quality management at Medtronic for 17 years. Jim has a master's degree in electrical engineering and a bachelor's in physics, as well as a bachelor's in economics and mathematics. He is also a dedicated member of the Minnesota Cryonics Rapid Response Team set up by Chuck down there, where he serves on their board of directors, and now will continue to serve and help out with our board of directors. Thanks, Jim. Second highest vote tally was 102 votes for Kevin Doyle. Kevin, could you stand up, please? Kevin holds a bachelor's. I'm sorry, I didn't see you over there. Yeah, Kevin holds a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Queen's University and Masters of Science from the University of Western Ontario. He also holds a PhD in operational research from the University of Toronto. Kevin has worked in nuclear power generation for many years, also has experience with optimizing projects in the healthcare and equipment maintenance fields, as well as areas of organizational behavior. In addition, he has run a large scale beef farm all his life, providing hands-on experience of ground level work and organization. He presently operates his own consulting organization. All right, thanks, Kevin. Our next incumbent director to get elected was Debbie Fleming. She's not here right now, but Debbie got 91 votes. She currently lives in Palm Bay, Florida with her 2 children and her cat and dog. She started working at a local semiconductor company 20 years ago in an entry-level position and has worked her way to her current position as an engineering technician. Her most recent accomplishment was obtaining her bachelor's degree in organizational management. Her father was John Bull, as you all might remember, was involved in Cryonics since the very first days back in the 60s and was a longtime editor of Long Life magazine. Next incumbent director to get reelected, also our youngest director who's not here presently, would be Nicholas Vandermeulen with 80 votes. Nicholas was born in '84 and has been a funded member of the Cryonics Institute, contracted with Suspended Animation since 2014. And in the year 2017, he acquired an associate in arts degree in biotechnology, got married to his wife, Nicole, who is also a funded member of CI and an experienced photographer, cinematographer, and graphic designer. Nicholas is working to continue enhancing the image of CI and achieve the vision of membership. Ultimately, Nicholas aims to significantly influence the developing science and technology in cryonics. So congratulations to the incumbents and also our new director. But I'd also like to say one thing to the other 2 directors. Let's see, we have I shouldn't say directors, but candidates. We got Vivian Gruss and Nicholas Lacombe. I appreciate you guys stepping up and throwing your name in the ring, even though you didn't win. You know, a lot of people have proven here that you don't have to be a director or hold the title to help out, to volunteer and put your time and efforts in. For instance, I know Nicholas has helped out with our CI app, and done some software development and repairs on that app to make it better. And you know, a lot of people here, like Shannon Blevins, for instance, he was unsuccessful in his last director's bid, but he does so much for us with social media, helps out with Instagram and Facebook and all those things. There's a lot of things people can do, and not everyone, you know, has a lot of money to donate. Some people have more time to donate. And I just want to show that this is, we've been accused of being a mom and pop operation. Well, yes, we are, and I'm proud of it. We all pull together, we all help one another out. It's one big happy boat, and you know, it all takes all of us to get to the other side. So with that, I think our food is ready, and we'll go ahead and we're going to take the questions and answers after. We're going to take about a 1-hour break, and we're going to take the questions and answers. I've written some down from the people online as well as from the audience, and then we're going to follow up with we're going to conclude with the IS report. Thank you.
Are you ready? Yeah. Joe, we're gonna go ahead with the cryo prize report. I'll turn it over.
Okay. And you can hear me, York? Yeah. Can you folks hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I told the story, I'll keep it pretty short. I told this story once before in my life. I'm going to tell it again. 35 years or more ago, my family went to Rochester, New York for my cousin's bar mitzvah, and we stayed with his family. And while we were there, the girl, 13-year-old girl, and her friends were walking with a group of people on a side street, and a drunk driver drove into them and killed 3 of them. And she's gone. Flash forward 35 years, and we had a 14-year-old girl in England who had cancer and fought to get herself cryopreserved, and she's now at the Cryonics Institute, and hopefully may come back at some point in the future. And that's really what we're all about at the Cryonics Institute and at the Immortalist Society. But follow me here. If we can't vitrify and revive an organ, we're not going to be able to do it for a full body. And for whatever reason, most people are just not into cryonics. But the vast majority of people are into organ transplants and organ transplant research. And I can't see you, but maybe you can tell me, can everybody raise a hand? Anybody who knows somebody who's had to have an organ donation, or knows somebody who's had an organ donation or needs one? Anybody out? Can you tell me, are there a lot of people raising their hands, York? Because I can't see it.
Yes.
Okay. So, this is something that's very common. One more question. Who here uses Amazon? Anybody here ever use Amazon? Anyone ever hear of Amazon? We have any hands raised?
Yeah, I've heard of Amazon.
York, we have any hands raised?
Yeah, I'll say yes. I'm thinking.
Well,
about
the reason I ask is that, is anyone familiar with the Amazon Smile program? Amazon Smile is a program where Amazon gives money to charity at no cost to you. And you can sign up for that, and they'll give money to the Immortalist Society, which will go to the Organ Cryopreservation Prize, which is working to help people vitrify and revive organs for organ transplant purposes. And later on, once we know how to do that, we'll be able to do it for cryonics purposes. The total in the cryo prize is now over $22,000. That is more than tripled over the past year. We're still nowhere near where we want to be. And we need people to join this Amazon Smile program and tell their friends about it, because it's free and it'll help us out. It'll help you out. I think part of the reason we've tripled the amount in the cryo prize is in part due to our new helpers, Kelsey Mathis, who's on right now. She's in New York, and Diego Zarco, who's in Mexico. And thanks to them, we have regular updates on our Facebook page. We have a Spanish language Facebook page and a Spanish video. We have updates to our website, updates to our video, and other things. I don't know, Kelsey, would you like to say hello? Are you there with us? Okay, I thought Kelsey was with us, but maybe not. But as I say, we're not where we need to be. And you folks who are sitting out there right now are the most active, the most interested, the most dedicated. And we need you to help us out with this. We need you to help yourselves out with this. Sign up for Amazon Smile, tell your friends about it. If you can volunteer with the Cryo Prize, great. If you want to make a $10 donation, great. We want to make organ transplants safer, less costly, and more available. Safer, less costly, and more available. Everybody out there will applaud you for doing this. And if we can do that, then we will make cryonics a reality. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, we're going to speed along. We're trying to get this done because we've got a limited amount of time here in the room. Royce is going to give our secretary's report, and Royce, you need to come up here to the, right at this chair here, so that the guys that are on the internet can hear you as well.
Right here.
Okay. Okay,
Okay, Secretary's report. In 2021 at the annual Immortal Society meeting, President York Porter opened the meeting and welcomed attendees to it. First, the President gave thanks to the Vice President Debbie Fleming for graciously chairing the 2020 meeting, since the President wasn't able to attend either in person or using Zoom software due to work requirements. Immortal Society Secretary Royce Brown gave the Secretary's report, for which there was no need for apparent correction or deletion. Leonie Blaney gave the Secretary's report, which showed a balance of $50,383.48. The Treasurer then gave the amounts allocated to research, the Cryo Prize, and for general operations. She indicated that individuals wanting to look at the details of the Immortal Society financial page might contact the IS President for details on the spreadsheet containing the detailed information. Treasurer then thanked everyone for their financial contribution to the society. CI President explained that the differences between the Cryonics Institute and the Immortal Society, he covered the name changes of the Immortal Society and mentioned both Long Life Magazine and the Immortal Society website. The website may be reached at Immortalis.com or Immortalis.org. Mention was made by the President of efforts being made to try to speed up production and delivery of the organization's magazine. It was explained that it was not possible to speed up postal delivery time as the cost of placing the magazine in an upgraded postal class is prohibitive. Thanks was given to American Cryonics Society for their help in sending out the Long Life magazine, as well as their cooperation in the research program. Thanks was given to Cryonics Institute for their efforts and recognition was made concerning the improvements of CI operations and facilities. It was mentioned that it is hoped that at the next annual meeting, one or both principal members of the research team would be there to explain the research to members. The President explained that the primary focus of research was to improve the perfusate solutions used in cryonics, along with some procedures, and to do so in a cost-efficient and practical way. Copies of the article were available in lieu of the ability of the researchers to present these articles, which would explain to some degree the research going on. Thanks was given to everyone contributing, small or large, to the research effort. Joe Kowalski again was mentioned as having been in the final charge of the Cryo Prize, which Mr. Kowalski had discussed earlier in the joint meeting. Mention was made of an upcoming book, which is hoped to be published in the next year or so, that will affect the field of cryonics. While unable to share much more information, it was hoped to be written by someone eminently qualified to do so. The President then asked if there were any old business to come before the society. There was none. There was no new business to come under the society either. The election of IS officers was then held upon a motion and second, which later carried. The existing officers were re-elected to continue for another term. The meeting was then adjourned.
Hey, please, edition, you better speak quick. Treasurer's report. Okay, thanks.
She's going to be back there.
Oh, okay.
During the annual meeting, it was indicated that the Immortal Society had $50,383.48 in total assets. Of those assets, $36,243.92 was allocated for research, $5,729.38 for the Cryo Prize, and $8,390.18 for general operations such as the magazine and the website. Turns out we apparently miscalculated last year, and we were $10 off in our reporting. We erroneously reported the amount for research as $36,253.92 last year. That amount should have been reported lower by the $10 figure. just mentioned, and should have been reported $36,243.92. Our apologies on that. For the report this time, the situation for the society is even stronger. We now have assets equal to $122,169.54. If our calculators are working better this year, this gives us an amount available for research of $62,672, with $10,114.15 in cash assets for the prior price and general operation funds available equal to $50,119.36. We had relatively low level of expenditures, this time for only $10,401.05, and this was combined for website work and expenses on the magazine. We do have one outstanding debt that will be coming up in the next few weeks for $1,000, and this is reflected in the figures just given. Revenues were way up with the total for all revenue, membership, donations, etc. at $82,923.08. You should also note that we will have a debt coming up in the next 10 months of $15,000 for the ongoing research project. That work is totally finished. We are engaged in that project along with the American Cryonics Society, where we pay half and AHCS pays half. As just mentioned, that research project isn't yet completely finished and all wrapped up, which it should be in the near future. So keep in mind that the research fund will be down around 15,000 in the next few months from the figure just given. But again, even considering that the Immortal Society is in the best financial shape as far as we officers can tell that it has ever been. And then we'd like to thank everyone that has helped in that effort, whether in a large or small way. All it is important to us and helps us carry out our goals. As we said at last year's meeting, for you financial types that want all the board details, the IS president has a spreadsheet that you can look at if you desire. Once again, thank you very, very much to everyone who has contributed, both large and small, on the ongoing projects of the Immortal Society. Thank you.
All right, I'm trying to go as fast as I can on this thing. But I can't help but tell one joke. Our little mistake on $10 reminds me of what James Gregory, the comedian, said about folks down my way. We have some tornadoes in Kentucky, not a whole lot like Kansas and so forth. We do have some. And it seems like whenever they send out somebody to interview, they don't get super intelligent people like Bob Ettinger. They get dummies like me to talk to. And the cameraman likes to zoom in on something that survived the storm that shouldn't have. So they zoom on a sign that says tomatoes, spelled E-R-S. Tomatoes, 45 cents a pound or 2 pounds for $1. So right away, they know we can't spell and we can't add either down there. So that's kind of what we're facing. Long Life is chronically late. Again, I'm trying to speed all this up. We are giving away freebie subscriptions to it. So if your name's not on the list, see me after the meeting. Real quickly, I want to offer a tip of the cap to all the people that worked so hard for CI down through the years, and in particular former CI president Ben Best is here, and I think all those folks deserve a big round of applause. While I'm thinking of it, Mike Perry has scanned in, my buddy out of Alcor, he scanned in all of the Immortalists, used to be called the Immortalists, now called Long Life. It's not yet searchable. There's in there as images. We're trying to work on a situation to put it through optical character reader so that you'll be able to search a thing. So eventually on the IS website, you should be able to see all the issues going back roughly 50 years. And it's interesting to read just to find that the folks earlier on are wrestling in some way to the same stuff we do now. Let's see here. Real quickly. I mentioned last year a book that I knew was coming out, or that I understood was coming out. And I said I thought it would be a very important one, and it was, and is. Robert Freitas is a highly regarded nanotechnology theorist. He's written a book called, I can't get all of it in there. It's Cryostasis Revival, and it directly speaks to how that cryonics patients will be worked on. One of the weaknesses, I didn't really view it that way, was the critics always would say, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? Early on, Bob did an excellent job in his book, The Prospect of Immortality, but still, to me, it's just like aviation early on. Humans have been interested in building flying machines for probably a millennia or more. Nobody could, including the great Leonardo da Vinci, could tell you exactly how it was going to happen until two bicycle mechanics made it happen at Kitty Hawk. And now none of us thinks anything about seeing aircraft flying over every day, coming in for landings here at the airport and so forth and so on. Rob has drilled really deep in this. It is a very technical book. We have a synopsis that he wrote in the latest edition of Long Life. There's some extra Long Life stuff here. This is the one with the rocket on the front. This is where his article is. I'm going to read this to you twice because I think it's so important. This is not me saying this, you know, what I think in a couple of bucks, I'll get you a soft drink up the street. This is somebody that's eminently qualified to talk about this. He says, quote, "It's just a question of when and not if we'll have medical nanorobots. Cryo patients can afford to wait in their doors as long as necessary for nanorobotic technology to sufficiently mature." This is a world-class expert in nanotechnology saying this. Again, not me. Again, it's just a question of when and not if we'll have medical nanorobots. Cryo patients can afford to wait in their doors as long as necessary for nanorobotic technology to sufficiently mature. It's going to be a circuitous route. It's like NASA going to the moon. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of research, redesign, so forth and so on. But as I said at the last meeting, Robert Ettinger was right when he wrote his book in the early 1960s. He was right through the decades, and he's even more right now. All righty, moving right along. Any old business come before the society? I probably skipped over something I shouldn't have. Any new business? All right, quickly, we're going to have a quick election of the IS officers. President is me, Vice President is Debbie Fleming, Secretary Royce Brown, Leonie Blaney is the treasurer, and we have a board member at large, Stefan Beauregard, who is not here at the moment. So the floor is open for nominations. Ding, ding.
I nominate we continue with the current board and the fine work.
Okay. All right, motion to do that. Any second to it? All in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We'll see you next year. It's back to you, Dennis.
Remember that. Unfortunately, due to the time constraints here, we're going to have to take a pass on the Q&A. And what we're going to do, though, is we're going to take the questions and answer the questions that were submitted to us on the computer and the questions that audience has submitted to us, and we're going to answer them online in our next news article. So I'd like to conclude and thank everyone for coming. And this ends the Cryonics Institute's 2022 annual general meeting. Thank you.